It was 2022. I was lying down in my bed and I was holding my iPad over my face like this, just scrolling through my YouTube feed, when I suddenly stumbled upon a YouTube video called "Deleting Social Media Changed My Life" by this YouTuber called Jordan Green. Now, I started watching this YouTube video and I immediately noticed that it was one of these like more raw and unfiltered and authentic YouTube videos that you would see a lot during that year. So as I was watching that video, he was giving me advice, or he was like telling his own story about whenever he deleted social media, suddenly his life changed, and that, he started to get all these amazing mental health benefits, and that he was able to be so much more productive and all things like that. And I remember that, as I was watching this video, suddenly I got this huge burst of motivation inside of me. Because, I already heard like multiple self-improvement YouTubers in the past talk about deleting social media and that you should do it because it's very good for you. But up until that point, I still had these excuses like, oh, I still need social media because I needed to talk to my friends and things like that. But when I watched the video of Jordan, it was like he was debunking all of the excuses that I still had. And he was being very raw and authentic, and he really spoke to me that day. So then, I got this huge burst of motivation inside of me, and I just knew that I had to make use of that right away. So when the video was finished, I just put my iPad away, I got out of bed and I grabbed my phone and I looked at all these like shiny small icons, all these like small social media apps on my phone. And without thinking any further, I started deleting them one by one. TikTok, gone. Instagram, gone. Snapchat, gone. Facebook, gone. Everything suddenly gone off my phone. And then immediately after I finished deleting all the apps, I noticed that I was feeling very proud of myself. I felt amazing. I felt very proud because I was like, I finally got rid of this awful addiction and now I can finally live my life to the fullest again. So then in the weeks that followed after this event, I honestly felt amazing. All the like mental health benefits that Jordan mentioned in this videos and all the YouTubers mentioned as well, they were really true. And I just felt amazing. I was going through life with so much more peace and clarity, and I felt so much more productive and all things like that. Honestly, things were just amazing. But then a couple of months after this, something interesting started to happen. Because suddenly I started to wonder why I was feeling so amazing still. Because even a couple of months after I deleted all the apps, I didn't have any trouble of like dealing with any withdrawal symptoms. I was expecting the fact that, I was very addicted to all these social media apps, so that I would have a hard time after I deleted all of them. But to be honest, I didn't have a hard time at all. It was very easy to stay away from them, and I had no urge at all to return to these apps. So I really started to wonder, what is going on here? Why are things going as well as they are going right now? So then after I started thinking about this for a while, then suddenly something clicked inside of me, because I realized that the reason why it was so easy for me to stay off social media is because I didn't actually get off social media. Because although I deleted all these apps like Instagram and TikTok and Snapchat and Facebook, now I was doing all kinds of other things, like watching a lot of YouTube videos. I was checking my WhatsApp more often. I was checking my LinkedIn more often and all things like that. So right now I realized that I had fallen into a trap, because all these YouTubers, they told me in their videos about deleting social media that YouTube, for example, isn't really social media. They always said to me like, hey, you should delete all those apps like Facebook and Instagram, but you can keep YouTube because YouTube isn't social media. So then I realized I had fallen into a trap, because then I simply replaced my social media addiction with all these other small little addictions like YouTube, checking my email, checking my WhatsApp, and all things like that. So now at this moment, suddenly I didn't feel as amazing as the months before that. Suddenly I realized that all this like happiness that I felt and all this pride that I felt of the fact that I'd finally deleted those apps, it was all just a huge coping mechanism. It was all just a little bit fake. I felt very proud of myself because I thought I killed an addiction. But in fact, I hadn't really killed an addiction. I just replaced it with something else. So then a couple of weeks after that, or in the weeks that followed after that, I started feeling very awful about myself, thinking about how I could finally solve this problem. I was very scared because I would think to myself, okay, even if I delete like YouTube and things like my email as well, or I limit my use, I would simply find something else to do instead, and I would still be addicted to something, and I would never be able to fully get rid of this addiction. So then I got a little bit worried, and I started thinking, okay, how can I solve this problem? So then I took a walk outside, and then suddenly something clicked inside of me, because suddenly I saw the answer right in front of me. I was walking down in the park, and I looked at a tree, and then there I saw it. A YouTube video called "Deleting Social Media Isn't the Answer" by this YouTuber called Cappie. I started feeling hopeful and feeling relieved because Cappie seems to know the answer to every problem in life. So without thinking any further, I pressed play. So this is the problem that you're facing right now in your life. You deleted all the social media apps like these YouTubers all told you to do, but now you figured out that you replaced it with all these other small kinds of addictions that served a very similar purpose, and now you just feel clueless about how to move forward and how to finally get rid of this addiction. Now, the first thing that you need to understand here is that social media isn't actually the problem here. And that means that deleting social media is also not going to be the answer to your problem. Because the actual problem that you're facing here is the fact that you aren't able to be alone with your thoughts. You know, throughout the years, you have developed this unhealthy coping mechanism of constantly covering up your thoughts and constantly covering up all those moments of like silence and emptiness throughout the day where there's nothing else in your life besides just you and your thoughts. You constantly covered it up with something like content on social media or YouTube videos and things like that now you aren't able to be alone with your thoughts anymore. Now, social media is, of course, the most widely used way to cover up your thinking because you always have your phone with you, which means that whenever you're having like an anxiety attack or something like that, you know, you're not very comfortable being alone with your thoughts, then, you know, you can always quickly grab your phone and start scrolling through these apps to instantly start feeling better and get all these dopamine hits. But then, of course, social media isn't the only thing that can do that because there's also other things like I just mentioned in my story, things like YouTube videos, checking your email, checking LinkedIn, that can also serve the same purpose and can also cover up your thoughts. And even if you would stop doing these things as well, which is maybe something you started thinking of right now, like, oh, I simply need to stop watching YouTube videos and stop checking my email as well, or at least limit the usage of these things, then that doesn't also really fully solve the problem because then you're just gonna go towards other things like, you know, checking the newspaper or just simply staring at the home screen on your phone because you're bored and you need some sort of stimulation or something like that. So as long as you don't address the root cause here, this cycle will just keep going on like this. Now, some people might say here that replacing social media with the things I just mentioned is actually not a very bad thing because social media is very unhealthy and you're simply replacing it with healthier alternatives. You know, these YouTubers, they might start saying things to you like, you know, you just need to fill up your days with healthy activities. Or if you are busy enough, you won't have time to scroll. Or at least watching YouTube videos is productive. But to be honest, I don't really agree with those people because yes, they are right about the fact that these alternatives are in fact a little bit healthier than social media, but it doesn't deny the fact that it's still a very unhealthy way to cope with the fact that you can't be alone with your thoughts all the time. You know, the dopamine hits that you will get from scrolling on Instagram, for example, might be bigger than the dopamine hits that you're getting from, you know, constantly refreshing your email or things like that. But it's still an addiction. You're still constantly providing yourself with stimulation. You still can't be alone with your thoughts. So basically, by using this so-called replacement tactic, where you do all these other things in your life in order to make sure that you don't fall back into like scrolling on social media again, it's actually not addressing the root cause of the problem here, but you're just covering it up with something else instead. If, for example, you're in your house and you notice that your roof is leaking, then what you might do in order to solve this problem is grab a bucket and just put it under the water so that the water doesn't drip on your floor here. And, you know, whenever the bucket gets full, you just grab another one and, you know, you solve the problem in that way and you might feel very productive doing so. But the problem with this approach is that you're going to fall into a trap when doing this because whenever you do it like this, you constantly have like the problem in the back of your mind. You're constantly wondering like, is the bucket full already? Do I need to grab another one? Or is the leak getting worse? Do I need to grab some extra buckets in order to solve the problem here? Which means that the problem is constantly at the back of your mind. You're preventing yourself from just living life to the fullest, where you're just more calm and peaceful and you can just do the things that you like to do. When you're quitting social media, you essentially have the exact same problem here. You might think that you're solving the problem by replacing your social media addiction with these things like, reading more books or starting a business or something like that. But all that you're essentially doing is just grabbing a bucket and putting it under the leak. And you leave the actual problem unresolved, which is the fact that you can't be alone with your thoughts. Let's say, for example, that you would replace your social media addiction here with something else, like starting a business. Now, at first, this might of course seem like a very good option because social media is unhealthy and unproductive, and starting a business is of course healthy and productive, which means that if you make this switch, you will be more healthy and productive and you will live a better life overall. And for the most part, of course, that's true, but you also have to understand here that there's a couple of problems with this approach. First of all, working on your business can be a great thing to do if throughout your day you have like a couple of hours of spare time, so you have lots of free time to work on your business and you can really sit down and focus on your business and really enter a flow state and things like that. But then on the other side, whenever you only have like short moments throughout the day, for example, maybe you're waiting in the line at the grocery store or you're waiting for the bus or something like that, and you only have like 10 minutes or something like that of free time, then that doesn't really work if you want to work on your business because, you can't really work on your business in only 10 minutes because you really need to focus and really need to think things through and things like that. So it doesn't really work that well for short moments in your life, which means that in those moments, you would most likely do something else, like just grabbing your phone and scrolling on social media instead in order to fill up the void here. And then second of all, if you choose to start a business in order to be more productive and fill up your days with all these like productive activities in order to not fall back into social media addiction again, then what happens is that you start doing the business more out of compulsion than out of passion. And that comes with a couple of problems on its own, because that means that you will put a lot of pressure on yourself to perform. You will start to think to yourself, oh, I really need to work hard on building my business because if I'm not productive or I have these days where I'm not feeling well and I don't really feel like working on my business, then I will be bored again and then I will start scrolling on my phone and become addicted to social media again. So I need to perform in this business. I need to stay on my A game or else I will fall back into the addiction again. So instead of just grabbing new buckets all the time in order to fix the problem of the leak in your roof, the actual way to solve this problem is to simply fix the leak itself. So now the question is, how do you do this? How do you fix the leak in your roof here? And the answer to that question is meditation, guys. Wow, who would have guessed that? No, but for real here, meditation really, once again, is the answer to this problem, because whenever you practice meditation, you basically practice being alone with your thoughts. You are observing your thoughts. And that means that if you do this practice a lot of times, it will also become easier to be alone with silence and your thoughts throughout the rest of your life as well. And that means that you will become more comfortable being alone with your thoughts. And that means that you won't have the temptation as much anymore to start scrolling on your phone in order to fill up the void. And the amazing thing about this is that when you do this more often in your life, you will not only notice that it will become more easier to be alone with moments of silence, but you will also notice that these moments of silence are in fact actually very valuable to your life, because you will gain all these like amazing new insights, for example. Because whenever you sit in silence and you just allow your thoughts to be there and you just observe them, you finally allow yourself to process them. And that means that they can go away and there's finally room for new insights to come inside of your head again. This is exactly why when you're taking a shower, you suddenly get all these amazing ideas, because it's just you and your thinking. You allow your thoughts to be processed so that then there's room for new thoughts to come in. And because it's just you and the water, there's nothing covering up that process, which means that new ideas can come in freely without any interruption. You can kind of look at this in a way where your mind is like a trash bin and then the thoughts are like trash. So essentially in real life, whenever the trash bin gets full, you need to empty it, or else it starts overflowing and things get a little bit annoying. So with your thoughts, that's of course very similar, because when your head is very full, you need to empty it as well, or else things get very annoying to deal with as well. So that's why you will need something like meditation, which you can use to process those thoughts, which means that you empty the trash bin, which means that you will have no thoughts and there's finally room for new ideas to come in again. So now some of you might be thinking, okay, Cappie, that sounds very reasonable. I get that it's very important to have these moments during the day where there's just silence and emptiness in order to become more calm and peaceful. But then as well, I have a lot of goals and ambitions, and I don't just want to sit there all day long just observing what's going on inside of my head. Like, I want to be productive. I want to reach my goals. I want to do lots of amazing things in my life. So how do I go about that? And of course, you're right about that. But what you have to understand here is that the goal is not to stop doing anything at all and only observe what's going on in your head all the time. But the goal is to become more comfortable with what's going on inside of your head all the time. So you can become comfortable with sitting in silence. And from that place, then you can decide what you want to do with your life. So then you can actually start thinking about what it is that you really like to do in your life. Whereas before you would start to do things to become more productive in order to prevent yourself from falling back into addictions again. Now you don't have to be afraid of those addictions anymore. You can simply do things because you like to do them instead of out of compulsion in order to prevent yourself from scrolling on your phone again. So if you really like to do business because you're very passionate about that, then go ahead and start building your business because it's a very healthy activity. And then when you do it out of passion, you will probably get better results in your business as well. But if you're starting a business, like in the example I mentioned before, because it's out of compulsion, you're doing it in order to prevent yourself from falling back into addictions, then don't do it, because then it becomes a very unhealthy obsession for you. And then you will also probably get worse results in your business as well. When you focus on fixing your mental health issues by doing some kind of meditation practice in your life, and you become more comfortable with these moments of silence and emptiness in your life, then what will happen is that you won't feel the compulsion anymore to do something to cover up the void anymore. You won't feel the compulsion anymore to start scrolling on your phone, for example, but you start to recognize that social media isn't serving your life in any way and that you don't need it anymore because you are comfortable to be alone with silence again. And then from that place, you can finally start thinking to yourself what you actually want to do with your life, and then start doing that thing. Not because some YouTuber told you to do so, but because you actually want to do that thing. So that's the end of the video here, guys. Let me know in the comments down below if you're gonna try this advice out or not. And if you did, be sure to come back later to let me know how it went for you. And right now, that leaves me with only one thing left to say, and that is to stop watching YouTube videos, start implementing this advice so you won't forget about this advice and actually change your life. Stop thinking, start doing. Take care.